Hello, everybody. This is Kops Office Hours. Today is Friday, April 24th, 2020. Happy birthday to my sister, whose birthday it is. And I'm your moderator, facilitator, Justin Santa Barbara. I work at Google. A reminder, this meeting is being recorded and will be put on the internet, and therefore please be mindful of our code of conduct, which is essentially to be a good person and try to respect the agenda. And we have put an agenda. I put a link to the agenda in the Zoom chat. Please feel free to add your name to the attendees list and add any items you would like to discuss onto the agenda. We do have a fairly full agenda, so please do put your items on the agenda at the appropriate place so we can be sure to get through them all. I think we'll get through them all, but yes, so we might need some sticking to the agenda type discipline. Let's kick off with Peter, who has raised an issue about etcd manager certificate rotation.
Yeah, so etcd manager creates certificates that it uses that are valid for 1 year, and there's no auto rotation support built into it. And etcd manager was introduced in almost a year ago in, I think, kops 112 maybe. And so there are many people running etcd manager for about a year now, and their certs are going to expire soon, which will result in an outage unless they manually rotate them. So
I have a quick question about that. We've been running kops since like pre-112, like probably a single digit. And I downloaded a couple of our certificates from the S3 bucket. I ran OpenSSL inspect on them, and they seem to have an expiration of 10 years. So I assume we're probably not impacted. This is only for users that their initial cluster creation was after 112 with etcd manager. Is that correct?
I think I can, so first of all, sorry about the issues. There are two types of certificate. There are the CA certificates and other certificates, like for API server, that's generated by the kops CLI tool.
Okay.
Those are 10 years because I knew that we would the 1 year was not enough. There are also, in etcd manager, it dynamically generates not the root certificate, not the CA certificates for etcd communication, but server certificates and peer certificates. And those are the ones which I think have 1 year validities. What I had meant to do and did not do was not persist those so that they would be rotated as long as a pod didn't last for more than a year, which was perhaps aggressive in and of itself, but the idea that they were persisted is doubly bad. So I'm glad, thank you, Peter, for catching this before it hit everyone. Someone put up a patch to rotate them automatically if they have less than 60 days left, which I think is good. I was suggesting actually basically, in the absence of, it looks like, I had to look, it would be a little bit harder to just not persist them. So I was suggesting to just regenerate them if they're more than 24 hours old. So in other words, it only does the check when you first start. Regenerate when they're more than 24 hours old. We could also go to 2 years or 3 years if we're unhappy about having to rely on restarting, or the etcd process or pod restarting at least every year.
is there anything we could do that doesn't require restarting the etcd manager pod?
I mean, I think there's two things, right? There's the users that are out there that are sort of where we're on the clock. And then there's like going forwards, happy path. So going forwards, happy path, we could, in theory, some processes will reload the certificate. I am not convinced that, there have been a lot of bugs around this, so it's probably not something we want to rely on, especially if it only happens every 2 years or every year to someone, right? That's going to be a really difficult one to figure out. I feel like people probably should be restarting their masters at least once a year. Maybe that's a year with the LTS, a year might actually be inappropriate now because the LTS of Kubernetes, I think we're going to go to a year support. So we probably should go to more like 2 years or 3 years. But yeah, in theory we can. Well, we can always regenerate the certificate and kill ourselves. We can always exit ourselves after a year, which would then like transparently restart. I'm not sure about that. I think probably the more important thing to do is to figure out what we do about all the people out there that are like on the clock. Obviously, we should fix etcd manager and do that. I can backport it as far as we can. It might even be worth doing a 115 backport for this. And then like a kops 115 backport. I don't know if we could post the workaround, which is to SSH it or exec in, delete your certs and restart, right? I don't know if there's much more we can do other than that.
I think the cluster spec has a etcd manager image field. So we might be able to get away with not publishing a new kops version, just publish a new etcd manager version and have them update that field, maybe?
Yes. Yeah, I feel bad about, because it's my mistake, I feel bad about like making people do things and remember to do things type thing. But yeah, we can balance that against like having to do an older a refresh of 115 or one like even further back. Can anyone see any reason not to effectively make the keys ephemeral, as in they are regenerated if they're more than 24 hours old or some very low number, so that they effectively are, although they are persisted on disk, they are effectively regenerated almost every time you restart. And what about going to like 2 years now that LTS is 1 year?
I don't like things being quite that long. I mean, we tend to kill a node about every 30 days.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great practice, and I think. So would you like a shorter lived? I mean, the CA cert is the one that really matters, honestly, and that has a 10-year validity. So
yeah, that's true.
Regarding LTS, even if it's an LTS, I don't think people should stay 1 year without restarting. I mean, that would get some upgrades or whatever updates, just not so extreme like for the other people.
I agree, and that was sort of what I was going for with this, like 1 year, every master pod should restart every year, like the 1 year validity. I feel like it's now biting me, and so that's where I'm like, meh, maybe that didn't work quite as well as I thought it was going to.
Well, it will be in 2 years if there is something, so better to know it at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could keep it at 1 year. We could keep it at 1 year, and then like the fact that the etcd manager will like drop is almost a feature, like saying like, hey, you haven't restarted your etcd manager in a long time. It's sort of an obnoxious like reminder though, like to have some downtime at whatever time in the morning or whatever it is that you happen to have last restarted it a year ago. That's
etcd manager is a pod something, right?
it is a static pod, yes.
Okay, does it have some sort of health check, or could we add some sort of health check? So even after a year, if someone didn't restart, it would suicide.
That's a good idea. We could use a health check, or we could just like have the process exit itself. Like either one of those would be fine.
Health check would catch other bugs if they happen, in case it's not a year or something else bad.
That's a good idea. I'll look at that. That is a good idea. And then we could also sort of we can also randomize it a little bit so that not all of them will exit at exactly the same moment in an edge check configuration. Yeah. Does anyone, Peter, do you remember the exact date when we introduced etcd manager?
think it was mid-May.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think it says May 2019 something.
Okay. And not everyone will have done it at exactly that moment, which is some saving grace, but yes, it will be. All right. So if we move forward with the PR to basically regenerate them on startup, even if they do persist, more or less all the time. The advantage of like the 24-hour thing is if you're in a crash loop, you won't constantly be generating SSH keys or RSA keys, which are sort of expensive. The health check, and we're sort of tepid on going from 1 year to 2 year. We definitely need a new image. We may need to backport to older kops versions.
Even if that sounds more work, given what I've seen in chat in general, people don't read the docs. In 1-2 months, we will see many people coming and asking the same question over and over again.
Yes, it would be good. I mean, we can put an announcement in the, when we have a procedure, we can put an announcement in Slack. We don't have a mailing. I don't think if we have a mailing list, it isn't widely subscribed to as far as I know. We probably could look at creating such a thing, like kops operators to like.
It won't really work. People don't, they mark it as spam at some point and don't read.
That's true. We would have to keep it to announcements only, which I think we have. I don't know. Like I will look at whether we have that, and then.
Could we use channels to do this?
That's an interesting idea. Yes. We probably could force a newer version of kops, and I think we might even be able to do a link to a thing. Sort of, yeah. I feel like it's definitely worth doing for the 1.12 versions. Like, if you're running kops 1.12, you probably, yeah. And then, yes, definitely, yeah. I think that's a great idea. I think that's a good approach. That's what we do for like security vulnerabilities, and this is arguably, we've arguably done that for smaller security vulnerabilities than like your cluster going down. So this is a, yeah, I think that's a reasonable one. And the impact will be, you are forced to upgrade kops, and if you don't want to upgrade kops, you have to pass one of the environment variables, which is like kops run obsolete version or something. So it will break CI if you don't update. It will temporarily break your CI if you don't update your kops version. Feels appropriate. I feel like we should do the backports to, if we're going to force people to upgrade, but we've also said we don't do that, so I don't know. That's a great idea. Yeah, channels is our probably the best way. And I don't know if there's anything we could build in for the future for channels, but that feels like a great solution. Like something more. It's difficult to pre-imagine like the next one of these that we could surgically like check. All right, there's nothing else on that one. Let's keep going so we have a chance of going through our things. Hakwan, the Jesse repos are gone in AWS at least.
I don't really know if they're gone or something, but they don't work. Didn't want to spend time on that thing in general. But 1.1.10 doesn't start anymore because cannot install packages, like a new node.
Yes, it shouldn't even have to install those packages. It just has to update to try to get the packages, because the packages should be pre-installed, but I don't know. Depends what exactly it's testing.
Well, in your versions, it actually tries to upgrade the packages or something to install them.
Okay.
At some point, it fails to run apt-get, or maybe just some parts are gone and not everything The idea is that it affects also build, not just 110, but let's say you want to build some of the Docker images. They are based on very old Jesse stuff. How do you say, the utils package that's also built inside Jesse and doesn't work anymore.
Yes, I feel like that is a great topic, but a different topic. On the 110, I will take a look and see whether there's some easier workaround. But I agree, like 110 is not particularly important.
So I see two ways: either drop it or move it to stretch.
Yes, I think I tried running it with stretch and it does work. So it's just that the default is.
It works even with later versions, so there's no.
Yeah, we did the official 110 images. There was a stretched variant. It just wasn't the default.
Mm-hmm.
So we could change the recommendation to the stretch variant as well in channels again.
Yeah.
I'll have a look at that, and then let's separately talk about the utils. Yes, it would be great to. So the utils, for people that don't know, is we have some OSs don't include some important binaries. Hackman, it looks like you called out SOCAT and contract, which sounds right. And so we try to build those statically linked and put them on the host OSs where they have to be. This makes me sad, but yes, I don't really understand how this happens. Like, how does CoreOS not have this? But anyway, it sounds like. Hackman, do you want to tell us what the state of the different OSs is? Like, you're saying maybe we can not do this anymore, which would be wonderful.
So I made my account in Google Cloud. So I tried the COS image. I found both the binaries there in the latest one I could find. So I would say that this one is working okay. There was an issue with the flat car. I also joined it, and they included both. Well, they included contract because SOCAT was already there, and it will be in the next release probably in a week. So it's okay. And CoreOS is gone for good. And the Fedora guys are considering including it in their Fedora CoreOS something. I left a comment there. They want first to be split into contract D and contract binary. So I think that will take forever because it's Red Hat. But I don't think we should, and there is that comment that I don't really understand the details. So I don't know why these were needed in the first place. But it says there that in Kubernetes starting 1.19, some things won't need those binaries anymore, or at least contract.
Thank you for those links. I will check up on this. I think there's another point you opened, which is the distro that we currently support called CoreOS. There is now another distro called Fedora CoreOS, which is different, right? Yeah. And so any users of CoreOS, of the distro formerly known as CoreOS, we should direct to Flatcar. Mm-hmm. And we should not necessarily assume that like we support Fedora CoreOS just because we supported CoreOS. Is that fair?
I think there's a fair thing, and I don't think it would have the same ID. So if someone tries to use a Fedora CoreOS, I don't think it will start.
Okay. So essentially, we probably should deprecate any support we did have for the distro formerly known as CoreOS.
And remove those binaries if we find that they're not useful anymore.
That would be great. That's my hope that we actually, yes.
Yeah. I found that out trying to build them for ARM64, which was...
It's surprisingly difficult to build the static binaries, static versions of the binaries from the upstream packages.
Mm-hmm.
Or I found it difficult. There may be people that are very familiar on how to do this and are just like, well, tell me you just pass LD flags or whatever it is. But yes, it was not as trivial as I hoped it would be.
The official announcement on Red Hat site is don't do static binaries in general. So I'm meaning for this kind of thing where you start to bundle pretty much a lot of stuff just to get some commands going. Okay, I think, I don't know, how do you want to do it? Do you want to look into dropping this, or I should just make a PR and assign it to you?
What would your PR do?
Delete the build stuff and remove the reference in
Why don't we start off by not shipping the utils on the distros where we believe it not to be needed, i.e. COS and Flatcar, even if Flatcar is going to be like a week away. And then we have that grid of tests now, so we might actually be able to verify that we are okay, and then that will be great. And then it's just in CoreOS we
CoreOS is pretty much gone. Their whole philosophy was that it auto upgrades and things like that. So in a month, I don't see any reason for it to exist or anyone to use it.
So we should do a PR to drop support for it?
Yeah. I mean, we should certainly tell people, and we have the support for it. We have like the flat car thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know what the right approach is. Should we deprecate? Should we? Because I don't want to force someone to. Oh, I don't know. Whatever. Can we start off by dropping the utilization of utils on COS and Flatcar?
I don't even know how. I will look into how they are even extract.
I can turn them off. I can do that.
Okay.
And we could certainly won't support utils. We certainly won't add SOCAT and contract on ARM64.
Yeah. Okay.
If that unblocks you, and then we can deprecate at least CoreOS. It would be great to get Flatcar working, and then we say, look, go use Flatcar.
Flatcar is, yeah. We'll see once it's released. I'll just add it to the test grid.
Yeah. COS and Flatcar. Why is it called Flatcar, by the way? Is there a joke I'm missing? I keep finding out that I'm missing jokes. No? All right.
Like a train car that is just flat that you put containers on.
Ah! Thank
like,
you. Got it. But it's not a CoreOS follow-on joke, but it is a container joke.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you. That'll help me remember it.
Okay.
All right. Hakon, you have the next one as well, which is
yeah.
I
add these things early, so
that's good.
okay. So GitHub is pretty unstable lately. People are complaining. It's blocking running kops because it tries to pull channels. I see that Peter also added the same thing below. So I saw in the issue that he opened there is a possibility to put it in more places, the channels file, same as we have the binaries and the images. And I was thinking of a way to even not pull the channels. So for people that don't really want to, basically the channel just gives you the recommended Kubernetes version and the image, the recommended image. Right?
Yeah, it also lets us do things like deprecate kops versions, which is as we've discussed.
So I agree with that. That's nice. But in some cases, some people may not want it. So maybe a flag at some point to don't try channels. I don't know. It's
Yeah, you certainly can. So I think what you commented, Peter, or was it Peter that commented in the issue is good, which is yeah. Like I think the key point is we don't use the channels file from GitHub other than when you're running the kops binary. So once you've created your cluster, there should be no dependency on GitHub. GitHub is in the list of mirrors, but it's in a list of mirrors. It's not. There's a fallback, right? So it's one of many sources to pull binaries from. So it's only when you're running create cluster or update cluster or presumably like delete cluster as well for bizarre reasons. And so that's I think important to tell people that might be worried about this. You can also like easily override the channels file with your own copy if you want to like put it on your own S3 bucket. The problem is it's one of our like authoritative sources of truth. It's not. I don't know whether it's a cryptographic root. I don't think it's one of our cryptographic roots, as it were. But it's like I think that's the kops binary, which is the root. But it does the kops binary and the Kubernetes artifacts directory. But it is it's sort of you're right. We don't technically need it. If we get it onto artifacts.k8s.io, in other words, where the kops releases, where the Kubernetes releases are, we will be in the same situation as in like, you can't bring up your cluster without that location being accessible anyway, or a mirror location being accessible. And so we will be no worse off. And perhaps people will feel more comfortable with the infrastructure around the Kubernetes releases than they are around like GitHub. Like pulling role from GitHub is like less protected than the Kubernetes releases are. So I think we should definitely emphasize to people that it doesn't like the situations in which we do rely on that URL being accessible, which is not once you've got your cluster going. And we should likely move that to artifacts.k8s.io or like some form of central K8s release thing. And I'm going to look again at doing that because I think actually it might also be related here. I'm not sure that I've populated the latest binaries onto artifacts.k8s.io. And so we likely are pulling more from the GitHub mirror. And I don't know whether we are therefore like hitting some sort of rate limiting thing as a project that is causing it to be particularly bad. Right, because so we have three mirrors now. We have artifacts, we have the S3 bucket, and we have GitHub. And if I forgot, I think the order is artifacts. So I think the order is artifacts, GitHub, S3 bucket. And so if artifacts isn't populated, we'll be putting more load onto GitHub. And it might be that they are throttling us.
No, it's just they
get
down for everybody.
Okay. Well,
that's a relief.
That's good. I feel like I should still get them onto artifacts.k8s.io because we might also start to hit fresh like bottlenecks there. But
okay, just if we do that, at least once the cluster is up, to not be required. So
that should already be the case.
I don't think it is. Like if it fails to pull it, I think it exits.
So the way I would explain it is the kops CLI binary is the one that reads the channels file. And once like node up, protocube, none of the kops controller, none of those should be reading the channels file.
No, but when you do kops update something, it will read it again.
Yes.
So if it's not, if during create, it's mandatory. But once you have the cluster, even if that fails, you should still continue, I think.
Okay.
You're
It's
not.
harder.
Huh?
Yeah, it's
Needs
hard.
testing around it, but yeah. I think that's an issue to be filed and maybe someone to put a PR together.
Yeah, like so I believe every time we run kops, we also, for example, download the expected SHAs of like kubelet, for example, and we download that from the official Kubernetes releases. So we do have shared fate with that source anyway. So if we, that's what I'm sort of saying. If we get it into that place, if we get that channels into that place anyway, I feel like we're no worse off.
It's not really like that, because so there was someone that was saying that he has a mirror inside the company with the binaries and images and everything. So he won't feel if any mirrors or all go down. But because that's hard coded and there is no way around it, the channel file, they cannot do pretty much anything while GitHub is down.
So they absolutely should be using, in that scenario, you should be using a mirror of the channels file, and you can override it. I will post on the bug how to override it. But you basically pass channels.
I don't think there's much documentation about how to provide a custom channels
That's
URL.
That's probably true. Yes. Yeah, I think it's documented on how to use the alpha channel, which is you just say channels equals alpha. But like the idea that that can actually be a fully qualified URL instead is not documented, I don't think. Or certainly not like best practices for like reliably like isolating yourself from anything else in the world.
Yeah, or any way to reliably cache it, like the assets phase.
Yes, good point. It should be in the assets phase. Channels as a doc and add to assets. All right. Thank you for that. Should we keep going? Because I think we have a bunch of things. I don't know if there's anything else on that topic.
No, I think that's it. The next one is Core DNS default, starting 1.18. We already discussed this a month ago or so, or 2 months. The PR is ready, but we are expecting for you to do the final review. So to get the approval.
I think I'm generally in favor. I don't know if anyone else has any reasons not to. I guess my only concern would be like, are we too late in the 118 cycle and should we put it in 119 instead? But that's, I don't know if anyone else has any reasons other than like timing in the cycle.
Well, you still have the replace for versions PR, which we'd like to get in, which is related.
I'm sorry, the what?
The replace before versions.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Does switching to Core DNS by default require a replace before versions because of the service update thing?
It's well, the replace for versions definitely because we want to change the port mappings in the service so that we can take root away from both Core DNS and kubedns.
If we did the replace root in 119, can we move replace before versions to 119 and go to Core DNS in 118?
Maybe. Yeah, I have to think about it, but I mean, we can always do stuff ourselves, but.
Yeah, I'm just like trying to think about like trying to get 118 out, although we have other topics that are going to impact that coming up. But yes, okay. That's,
yeah, I think the main problem there is how do you switch your service from one to the other, and that might require a replace before version.
right, which is a tricky change, sort of in terms of strategy for our management of those manifests. Okay, I don't think we can make a decision right now. I feel like yes, in theory we should go to Core DNS. I think the if we have to do it along with the user, that will probably be riskier, and I'd rather punt that to 119. If we can split it out, I think we can probably do it in 118. Does that sound reasonable to people?
Yeah.
Sorry, John, we got to run a private fork for a little bit longer. Looks like one more, Hackman. The default image for 117 onwards, Debian Buster or Ubuntu 2004? Ooh, interesting. Timely.
Well, Stretch is not really updated, so there are quite a few noticeable bugs for people that use older kernels. And as we discussed last time, we have to choose some new image to have the default now that we can. There are pros and cons to both of them. Yes, Debian is known by everybody because it used to be the default image. It has a downside because they switched by default to IP tables NFT, which is not very good, at least not for all the CNIs. Ubuntu has a much newer kernel, so it's the latest long-term support kernel. So it has all the contract bugs fixed in it, as opposed to Ubuntu, as opposed to Buster that still has various issues. So it's basically something that we should, well, that we will carry for the next few years, because I don't think there will be another Debian or whatever release for about 2 years.
Okay, I mean, I think can I propose we get the various options into our grid, into our testing, and sort of see how they behave. Like something I've been really pleased about is like looking at our tests, how stable our sort of recommended images are, and I think we should try to keep that.
So at the moment, all the CNIs, the older ones, are running on Ubuntu 20.04 since yesterday.
They're running, but they're not all passing, are they? Anyway, I think there are some there we can talk about that later. But yes, I think if we look at the two and then we can make a decision maybe in next time round. I have a Buster image, which I think is a nice way to build things. So I'll throw that in the mix as well. But I certainly take your point that it'd be nice not to have to build the image ourselves, but it is also a nice thing we can offer to users.
So yeah, that was the second thing, to use the official images from Debian or Ubuntu. This way we can even just modify channels from time to time instead of building images, which I think it's kind of a chore also for you.
It is. There is, though, the project that is actually spinning up to build these more automatically. So there is actually momentum there. But yeah, I feel like let's get some data on the various options. I thank you for adding the Ubuntu 2004 stuff even before it launched. That was awesome. I think that was you, right? And yeah, that's so cool. So now we have like some signal already. And yeah, it certainly looks like Ubuntu 2004 looks like a good candidate. Something Buster looks like a good candidate. I don't know if anyone else has any of their preferred ones, but those are the two that I see as the most likely candidates. It is nice to have a recommendation is nice, so people don't have to we don't just like give users a choice that they don't have any data to make with which to make that decision. And so that would be we should gather that data and then make a decision, make a recommendation, I think.
Okay.
Great, thank you. All right. Peter, channels for etcd manager.
Yeah, this is just a high-level thought I had. We could add an etcd manager version to channels, and then kind of assign kops version, assign kops version ranges to etcd manager versions, so that people could more easily upgrade their etcd manager without having to download a new kops release, unless something like the rest of the manifest also needed to change. But if it's just the container image changing, maybe that's something we could put in channels.
That's a good idea. I think I also had a PR a while ago to actually put the manifest up there. I think it was in a different file, so it will make life harder for anyone mirroring channels. So we probably should figure that out at the same time. Yeah, I think it's a good idea to not to decouple these things in general. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. I don't know whether we should do just the version or whether we should pull out the whole manifest. But yeah, that seems to me like a great idea. I'm also not sure whether it should be tied to kops or tied to Kubernetes versions. Presumably it should be tied to kops. I don't know. Kops versions feels right? Like it's saving us from doing a kops build, so yes. But on the other hand, the model where the add-ons are tied to the kops version is sort of wrong. So I don't know.
I'll maybe open an issue with some more thoughts on it.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, I have the next one, which is I uploaded all our YouTube videos as of 2 weeks ago, so we're up to date. On some of them, I accidentally left comments enabled, and for once, that worked out well. Someone posted a good comment that we should try that GitHub Actions supports Mac OS. So last time we had talked about Travis being problematic, and the reason why we continue to use it is because of GitHub, is because of Mac OS. And maybe we can try to get GitHub Actions going to try to give us some Mac OS coverage. I briefly Googled it. It seems like it was true. So that would be a great thing for anyone to contribute if they're interested in adding a GitHub action to run. I think basically the thing we care about on Mac OS is that I can go build command kops. That's the thing. Maybe make kops, but like those are the build that is done when I install it using the Mac package manager, whose name is
Homebrew.
Sorry,
Homebrew.
Homebrew. Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. And yes, I will be uploading video. I intend to upload videos in a more timely fashion now. I also have the next item, which is I added some more tests. So John brought up the flannel issue previously. I looked into it. It is messy. I added some more tests to try to basically get some coverage, a sort of, I'm calling them grid because it's basically like just doing like every permutation. It's showing us that we are doing okay when we like on our stock configuration, and we're doing okay if I set just the CNI, and we're doing okay if I set just the distro. It also shows us that if we set both the CNI and the distro, we have a lot of problems. So in particular, this one is, the one that came up was, I think, Flannel and Rel. We had a patch actually in our PR backlog for Flannel and CentOS, and that made it better, but there's still an issue with Flannel and Rel. So basically, I'm trying to get data on like our various combinations so we can actually make these recommendations. And actually, it's not as many as I thought. So I will likely beef that up. The way I'm sort of structuring it is that they run effectively as periodic jobs, and they run on a sort of weekly schedule. And right now, I think they're all running daily, but as we add more, they'll go onto a weekly schedule. So like the combinations that we are testing will run about once a week, and we'll get some idea of like how we're doing just by looking at them. So we can certainly add a lot more jobs by going from daily to weekly. And I feel like we still have capacity to do some more permutations if there are other things. Like if we want to test HA masters, or if we want to test private topologies, for example, we could throw those in. The other one is we could also test older Kubernetes versions, and we could also test older kops versions. At this point, though, the grid is now exploded, so I don't know if it will still fit in the 168 hours that we have in a week. It probably won't, but we might be able to like go up to monthly scheduling or something like that. Or anyway, it seems like it's an interesting way to gather a lot of data. It's not as good for like, I know Peter and Hackman have done great work to like make sure we actually test the ones we really care about. This is more of a like, let's get data so that we find these weird things before users do, or when users report something, we can go click on the appropriate tab and see like, oh yes, there it is right there, and we can like get some logs. And I also added a PR this morning to capture syscuddles as part of the dump. So we'll have the syscuddles on each test in a couple of days, and so we'll be able to like do that. So the intent is that basically when we're trying to diagnose problems, we have a run. It might be a month old, but we have a run, and we can like look at the syscuddles and compare syscuddles across distros or across working versus non-working, and we can add more things like syscuddles to the mix when we figure out what the other things are. I did debate putting in ETH tool settings because we know that's a likely candidate, but I didn't do that. And Hackman, you had a comment about that we might benefit from updating Flannel.
I don't really know if we will get any benefit, just that Flannel is right now 0.12, I think, and we are on 0.11.
Okay.
It still doesn't have the patch for the issue John reported, but I think it's very likely that they will create a build at some point.
Yes. For context, I think there are two issues that we are sort of known. One that we spotted was in the PR. It was in that PR that someone sent about a month ago, possibly even longer. But which is the rel distros changed some syscuddles to not put bridge traffic through IP tables. I'm waving my hands a bit, but it changes the syscuddles in a way that's incompatible with Flannel. And so the first fix was to basically fix those syscuddles. The second one is there are reports of VXLAN checksum corruption, and the workaround is to turn off the VXLAN checksum, which you do using ETH tool, and there's a PR against Flannel to like do that by default. The thing which gives me pause is it's supposed to report it in the journal, in the systemd journal, in the syslogs, and I have not yet seen that on any of our failing tests. And we do see failing tests that are failures of API server to talk to services, which should be the same case as has been reported elsewhere, where host network pods cannot talk to services. So I don't know if anyone is happily running Flannel on RHEL or CentOS, but if you are, I would love to know how you are doing it. I suspect you're just not hitting this problem. You're not talking from host network pods to pods, normal pods, overlay pods, I guess. But like that's why I also added like I wrote one a while ago, which is now very similar to Flannel. Like it uses VXLAN overlays, so like that's why I threw that one into the mix so that we could like compare like Flannel VXLAN versus my VXLAN Copio VXLAN, and like see what the difference was, if there were differences. Anyway, all right. Hackman, so we have 2 items left on the agenda, and then maybe a release plan discussion, and 9 minutes left. Hackman, ARM64 support. This is great news.
So I made it, at least for worker nodes. There's still things to do in general, like if we want to get masters also to support ARM. It's not huge, but I'm not fluent in Bazel, so that's a challenge. Other than this, I used a different approach than it was previously, I don't know, suggested in code. Instead of trying to figure out what the instant group architecture is, I just pushed the binaries to the host and let node up figure it out. So basically, it's pretty easy to decide the architecture of the host once you start running there.
And did you also tweak the bash script to like look at it?
Yeah. So basically, I sent both AMD and ARM script to the bash script. It checks uname -m, and after that, it loads the appropriate node up, which is already knows the architecture is built for.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah, that sounds great. I think we talked about doing this not in 118 but in 119 because I think,
yeah,
for example,
it's 119, so no rush. Okay.
Well, I mean, it's a rush to get 118 out so that we can, yes, or at least cut the 118 branch.
Yeah. So no rush on this as a PR, but would appreciate at some point some help in building the images and etcd manager.
Yeah, I will do that. Yeah, I need to understand how to do multi-arch images if that's what we want to do. So.
Okay, let's chat on that, I think.
Exactly. I'm sure there's an example somewhere. I just need to dig it up. All right. I'm mindful of time, so I'll keep us going. Thank you for that support. I'm sure everyone is eagerly waiting for that, especially Mac users. Peter, do you want to talk about etcd managed Cilium?
Yeah, so this PR was just to allow us to create clusters using the etcd managed Cilium configuration purely with create cluster CLI flags so that we can test that in our crowd jobs because we can't provide a manifest to crowd jobs. We can only provide create cluster flags. So I think it overall looks good, but I just wanted to get more eyes on it before we add a new CLI flag. So someone else can take a look at that.
Yeah. Can you clarify? It looks like it uses overrides and a CLI flag. Are overrides not sufficient?
Yes, because we need to be adding. It's a new etcd cluster, which is a bit more complex than.
And I am working on the generalization of the override, but I definitely don't want to be like supporting arbitrary like patches. There are better ways to do that. So that makes sense to me. I will have a look to see if it's possible to like generalize the concept of having additional etcds, but it probably is not worth it. This looks reasonable in that light. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts. All right. So in our 5 minutes remaining, that's actually quite nice. We will have a look at someone pasted the release plan for the upcoming 2 weeks. Thank you. I think this is, pasted from previously. I did do the 116 release. There was a request for that. So that's crossed off, thank you. And then I think the other ones are just carried forwards. I have sort of been blocked on trying to understand the state of Flannel. I feel like if it's pre-existing, we should just roll forwards with a release note. But we also don't yet have the test coverage to prove that it's pre-existing. So maybe I need to throw a Kubernetes 116 into the grid and double it immediately. But I don't know, John, you've like taken up the mantle of Flannel. If it was pre-existing.
I put my PR on hold because it seems the matrix is more complicated. So
yeah,
I think it's now just a stick to hold in front of the Flannel guys to fix something.
That's a good stick. I like that. Yeah, that is good. But yes, I feel like if it existed, if it's the same behavior as it was in, let's say, 116, we should put notes in there saying that. I feel like right now the note would be pretty long, as like these set of combinations are known to be bad, and so that's a little. I want to have a look at the grid and see whether I can tackle any of those, but I don't think we would hold up the releases for that. And so yes, it's the other items on the list that I think would be a great goal for the next 2 weeks. So another 118 alpha, the 117 release, which is blocked on figuring out the status of Flannel and stuff. And Buster AMIs are getting closer.
Did you see my PRs?
I saw your PRs. They are using they're still using the Debian Bootstrap VZ, right?
Yeah.
But as I understand it, Bootstrap VZ isn't supported anymore. So you had to like patch it?
Yeah, it's in the PR.
Yeah.
It's just 2 lines. I mean, just to recognize that's Buster.
It is an option. I am wary of, as you say, like committing to Bootstrap VZ for another 2 years.
The problem with Buster is in general the IP tables one. At least for now, it has to be disabled to be legacy.
Yes.
So we cannot use the default, well, the official images.
Yeah, and thank you for all the work you've done on that. We need to, I need to catch up on that. I was looking at Flannel first, and then I was gonna look at IP tables, and then I will put that on the list to figure out like IP
Don't
tables.
worry. It was just a suggestion. So if you think you have a better way, it's okay for me.
I have a very different way. And I did put up my PR. You should have a look at it. It's sort of interesting. It's the idea is you can build an image using Docker,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can wrap it. You can basically convert it to a disk image. So you install the kernel in your Docker container, which doesn't really do anything, and then you like copy it into a disk image. The advantage of this is we have relatively self-contained tooling that we are relatively familiar with. There is tooling for repeatable builds, and then we have this weird transform step, like that, like wraps it in a disk image. So the thing I don't like about Bootstrap VZ is like a lot of the logic was very, very opaque. Like you had to like dig through layers and layers, and I feel the same way about the new official Debian fully automated install thing. It's similarly opaque. So I'm hoping we can find something a little bit less opaque, or we just use the upstream images and say, this isn't our problem. We don't have to solve this problem.
Mm-hmm. May I mention one more important bug that I noticed in the last few weeks? I think that etcd backups are not being cleaned.
That would be a bad bug. Okay. Have you reported this on etcd Manager, for example?
No, didn't have time. Just
Okay.
looked at one guy and he said that they're growing out of control. Let's say, and that look at mine and I saw about 15 gigs of them for one cluster.
That is a lot. We do retain them. We do retain them for quite a long time period, but I think we retain them on a sort of decreasing granularity. It's supposed to be on a decreasing granularity scale. So like, I think we keep all of them for the past 24 hours, and then like hourly for the past week and daily for the past month, let's say, right? So it's supposed to look like that. I don't know what it looks like. So that's what would be interesting to compare.
Yeah.
It should not be like every 15 minutes for a month.
I will have to take a deeper look to see, and we'll report it on the etcd Manager.
Thank you. And I'll also look at the ARM support on that as well.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, we are at time. I don't know if anyone else has any last topics they want to slide in. Otherwise,
Well, I saw some final related PRs going 118 and to backport those to 117.
pardon me. You want to? That's
I saw some of the final related PRs go into 118. Perhaps they should be backported.
Okay, I'll put that on the list. Backport final PRs. And Moshe, did you have something?
Yeah, quick question about stable channel. I've noticed that at least for 116 that we use, we're 2 versions behind the latest on Kubernetes. Right now the recommended is 116.7, and the latest on Kubernetes repo is 116.9. Is there a special process that we go through to upgrade those versions? If not, I don't mind just taking a stab at making a PR for that.
What we typically do is we actually just put them in the alpha channel first, and we let them run through the test grid, the tests are EDE jobs, and then if everything looks good and no one reports any problems with the alpha channel, we basically promote it to the stable channel after between 1 and 2 weeks. If it's a critical security issue, we can just go straight to stable, but I don't believe there's a critical security issue. So if you wanted to do that, that would be a great thing to put through. Start with the alpha channel, and there is plenty of, if you look at the history of the alpha channel, there should be plenty of examples there.
Perfect. I'll do that.
Thank you. All right. Last call. Otherwise, I wish everyone a very happy 2 weeks. Thank you. Bye.
Have fun.